So Stacy showed you that the photograph, the rendering of the Albuquerque aquifer. You know, from all of the work that John Hawley did and others did in the 1990s. I was water resources manager for the city of Albuquerque at that time, and I've been working on demonstrating publicly and with science what we in the water division knew, and that was that the aquifer under Albuquerque was not infinite, which everybody believed. And when we were ready to go public with our modeling of the aquifer that showed huge groundwater declines under Albuquerque, and they matched the data, we couldn't visualize the results like that. Los Alamos National Laboratory volunteered to visualize the water table decline that would occur in the future if we didn't change our ways. And I believe they spent $40,000 on that. I'm not sure how much it cost to generate Stacy's graphic, but that is part of the generational change. And it's time that these new leaders are listened to and that we give them support. Thank you, Stacy. So my theme is that New Mexico residents really need to respectfully demand that the governor and our legislature begin our adaptation to living with next water, to living with less water. And the action is at the legislature. The legislature has not paid serious attention to water. When Peter Wirth, Senate Majority Leader Peter Wirth, spoke to a group not too long ago, he was asked a couple of questions. And the first one was, what 3 issues in New Mexico are not being attended to by the legislature, but which ones are the most important? And he named water first. And he also said later on, in terms of what needs to be done, he explained that we need to fund our water agencies, that we need to change our laws, and really many of the things that we're talking about in this conference. So we really appreciate your participation. But the action is in the legislature, and what we have to what we have to do now is to convince the legislature to provide the funding and the staffing for the agencies that Stacy alluded to, and to meet some of the priorities. So what does Fund New Mexico's Water Future mean in 2022? The state engineer presented a budget expansion request to the governor's office in August of this year. And I'm told that it was initially well received, but in the end, he was directed for, I believe, the 3rd time in a row in the present administration to submit a flat budget. And in this time of substantially increased revenue for the state, he did the honorable thing and resigned. The agencies are crippled by the lack of staff and funding, and nobody was paying attention. The governor's budget came out a few days ago, and it does contain increases for the agency at the level of 4.3%. We need more than that. And I guess the place to get started are the elements to the Water Advocates budget request, and I'm going to share a screen right now that shows you what the Water Advocates are thinking. How well can you, I hope people can read this. There's basically 3 parts or 4 parts to the Water Advocates appropriation budget requests. The first is what the state engineer requested back in August of 2021. He requested 39 new positions, $5.3 million for staff and for contracts, $15.2 million for levies and for litigation in the lower Rio Grande. And that increase totaled about $19 million. The increase included about $19 million. The Water Advocates and I'll get to this in a moment, believe that $8 million of that total should be shifted to where it belongs. And that's my next point. The second section of the Water Advocates budget request deals with initiatives that the state engineer failed to request increased resources from the legislature. First of all, the amount that was budgeted for experienced professional staff, hiring experienced professional staff at competitive rates. And we need experienced staff. The staff that we need can't be entry level. There's room for some entry level people, but we really need experienced staff and managers to replace the brain drain of the last few years. And they need to be equipped to be productive. So we've included an increment of funding for that. The state engineer had nothing in his budget to deal with the Rio Grande Compact compliance crisis that we'll be talking about a week from today. So the Water Advocates included funds for the state engineer to begin working on Middle Rio Grande priority administration rules, and for the Interstate Stream Commission to initiate a facilitated collaborative shortage sharing discussion in the Middle Rio Grande that would involve all stakeholders. The third element is to initiate regional water planning that must have scientific integrity and an adequate scientific foundation so that we can determine what we need to do to come to grips with the fact that our water supplies in the future are going to be 25 to 35% less than they are today. And today we're using more water than is sustainable. So it's really a big lift. The fourth element was to implement the Water Data Act. We haven't coordinated this carefully enough with Stacy. So if Stacy's initiative succeeds, we can take $600,000 out of the Water Advocates request, which was for staff for the agencies, for the Office of the State Engineer and the Interstate Stream Commission.
We lost your sharing.
Norm, your sharing is switched to something else, your calendar.
Oops, thank you for telling me that. I don't know how that happened, but let me share again. I moved the window on my screen. Thank you. The fifth element that was missing from the state engineer's budget expansion request that we think is crucial is the initiation of a routine program of water resources investigations and data collection by the Office of the State Engineer and the Interstate Stream Commission in cooperation with the New Mexico Bureau of Geology. And specifically, we requested 3 staff scientists to start to rebuild the Hydrology Bureau, which has been decimated by resignations and mostly retirements, loss of a lot of institutional memory there. The third piece is to restore the balances of 2 funds that were created before New Mexico became a state. These 2 funds, they're currently named the Irrigation Works Construction Fund and the Improvement of the Rio Grande Income Fund. They each receive the revenue from a small fraction of the Land Grant Permanent Fund, but it's a significant amount of money every year. These funds were created to pay for infrastructure and to improve the channel of the Rio Grande so that water would move downstream and that depletions would be reduced and deliveries would be increased. And both of those all of that are current problems. We don't have sufficient funding for irrigation projects, irrigation water conservation improvements. And the state engineer in his expansion request asked for $8 million for Middle Rio Grande levees and Rio Grande channel maintenance. And that's because the legislature has depleted the trust funds by using them since 2010 to pay for staffing and operations. So our third request is for $100 million to replace the trust fund expenditures that have been wrongfully expended since 2010 for staff and routine expenses. And Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's budget for this year continues to use the trust fund to fund agency staff and operations. The fourth category came from Mike Hammond in discussions with him. He believes that from federal stimulus funds that the legislature should appropriate $50 million for statewide drought relief and $15 million for compensated rotational fallowing of farmland in the Middle Rio Grande. The rotational fallowing is required, I think, in both Mike Hammond's opinion and in mine, to prevent a pending another violation of the Rio Grande Compact. We're in a bad situation. The debit at when the accounting is done for 2021 is likely to be about 130,000 acre feet in arrears in these deliveries. And the numerical limit is 200,000. So we're getting uncomfortably close to that violation. And at this point, we've broken that down into three bills that we are seeking sponsors for. I think the bills are appropriation bills. They'll be relatively simple. One bill would fund basic agency functions, which is most of what the state engineer requested of the governor and subsequently resigned over. The second is the Water Advocates request is broken up into three pieces. The first will be to replace obsolete information technology in the Office of the State Engineer and the Interstate Stream Commission. We believe that a $10 million upgrade is in order. Some of the old systems that manage and make data available are running on software that is so old that it is very hard to deal with, and it's certainly not very productive to deal with. Experts are required to extract information from it. So replacing the hardware and software is a big need, and we're asking for a $10 million four-year capital appropriation for that. It sounds like that too overlaps with the Water Data Act funding, which I believe, Stacy, that's for 5 years of funding. Bill number 3, increase Middle Rio Grande water deliveries. There are two pieces to that. The first is Mike Hammond's concept that the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District would administer rotational fallowing throughout the district. That's the only way we're going to get additional water into the river this year and next, because there's no capability for administration in the Middle Valley. It includes $1 million for the state engineer to develop and publicly promulgate priority administration rules for the Middle Rio Grande, and $1 million for the ISC to begin and support collaborative shortage sharing discussions among all the Middle Rio Grande stakeholders. So 3 bills are associated with the Water Advocates request. Another bill is associated with this refund of the trust funds that should be expended, should be available for operations, for infrastructure that are being spent on operations. And the last section, I believe, is up to Mike Hammond and the governor, except that we're going to borrow his idea for the rotational fallowing and put it into our increased Middle Rio Grande water deliveries bill. With that, I believe the next thing is to get ready for the breakout discussions. So I'll stop sharing. Thank you.